In the previous video, we have seen how to access the GitHub server from the Git client using HTTPS protocol. There we have entered the credentials every time the client needs to access the GitHub server. To avoid that, we need to store these credentials in the client machine. So how to store the credentials in the client machine? So there is a concept of Git credential helper which will allow us to store the credentials in the client machine. So there are different methods. In the first method, we can use the in-memory cache. That means the credentials will be stored in the memory of client machine. In the second method, we can store the credentials in the storage. That means we can store the credentials in the disk of the client machine permanently. And for Windows machines, we can also use the concept of credential manager. So in this video, we will see how to store the credentials using these three methods. One more thing about in-memory cache credential helper. Generally, it needs Unix sockets. So generally, we use this method for the Linux-based client machines. So let us start. So this is our repository. Let us clone this repository using HTTPS protocol. So we have to copy the URL link. So here I will use the git clone command for cloning the repository. So it is asking the credential now. So we have to provide the username and personal access token. So this is the username. So let us enter the personal access token for the password. So the repository is cloned successfully. So now let us go into the repository. Now if we want to update the changes in this repository from the remote repository location, then we have to use git pull command. So this command is also asking the credentials. That means for every git command which will access the GitHub remote repository, then we have to enter the credentials. So to solve this, we have to store these credentials in this machine. So here I am not entering the credentials. Let me close it using Ctrl+C. So now we have to store the credentials. So let us use the first method for storing the credentials in the memory of the client machine. So let us start with in-memory cache git credential helper. So this is the Windows client machine. So now let us try to save the credentials in this Windows-based client using in-memory cache. So for changing the helper configuration, we have to use git config command. So here I am changing at global level, that means user level, and here we need to mention the credential helper, and the value of this should be cache. So let us execute this. So now the credential helper value is changed. We can verify the value using git config command again. Here we need to mention the list option. So now we can see the value of credential helper is cache. So now let us try to pull the repository here. Here it is saying a fatal error. It is saying the credential cache unavailable, no Unix socket support. Since we are using Windows client, we are getting the issue of no Unix socket support. So that is the reason generally we do not use this in-memory cache for Windows-based clients. So for this, let us use a Linux-based client. Let me log into your Linux VM to explain this method. This is the Linux virtual machine. So here let us try to clone the repository. So now it is asking for the username. Let us enter the username. And we need to enter the personal access token. The repo clone is successful. So now let us go to the my test repo directory. So here let us try to pull the repository contents again. So now it is asking for the credentials again. So let me close this one. So before pulling the contents again, let us try to save the credentials in memory cache. So for that, let us try to change the configuration of credential helper. So for that, let us use git config. I am changing at global level, that means user level. So here we need to give credential helper, and the value of this should be cache for in-memory cache. So let us verify the configuration. So here we are providing the list option. So here we can see that the credential helper is set to cache. So let us try to pull the contents again. So here let us enter the credentials. So here we need to enter the token. So here it is saying already up to date. So that means the git pull is working without any issue. So now let us try to enter the git pull command again. It should not ask for the credentials again because these credentials are stored in the cache. So let us try to enter the pull command now. So now we can see that it did not ask for the credentials again. So generally when we store the credentials using in-memory cache, it will be stored for default 15 minutes. That means after 15 minutes, we need to re-enter the credentials again. So this value can be configured using a timeout option. So for that we need to change the configuration of credential helper by providing a timeout option. So here for the option we need to provide cache with timeout. So for example, if I want to store the credentials for 1 hour, then I need to give 3600 seconds. The value of timeout will be in seconds. That's why we need to enter 3600. Now we can verify the configuration again. So here we can see that the timeout value is set to 3600. That means the session will be valid for 1 hour. This way we can use the credential helper for storing the credentials in the in-memory cache of the client machine. So in the next method, we'll use the in-storage method for storing the credentials. So for this we can use the Linux or Windows machine as the client machine. Here I am using the Windows machine. So here I am already in the repository, my test repo. So let us try to use git pull here. So it is giving the previous error because we have not changed the credential helper. So let me change that. So here instead of cache, we need to provide the store method. So I'll specify store here. So when we specify store, by default it will be stored in the .git credential file in the home directory. So let us execute. So now the credential helper is set to store. We can verify that. Here we can see that the credential helper is set to store. So now let us enter git pull command again. So here we need to enter the username. Let us enter the token here. So here the git pull is giving already up to date. That means this command is successful and the credentials are stored in the disk of the machine. So now we can verify whether the credentials are stored in the home directory. So let us go to the home directory. So here we can verify the .git credential file. So we can see that the file is existing here. So we can verify the credentials as well. So here we can see that this is the username and this is the password, which is a token for accessing the repository. So this is the default file which will be stored when we don't specify any file for the store method. We can also specify a particular file using a file option. So for that we can change the store method to store. Then we have to provide the file option. So here we can give file. So now this file will be used for storing the credential. So let us enter the pull command again. So now it is saying already up to date. So let me go back to home directory. So that is where we have stored this new get credential. So let me open. Now we can see the file content. So let us enter the pull command again. Now this time it should not ask for any username and password. So let me go back to the directory and here I will execute. So now we did not ask for any credential because it is using the credentials which are present in the new get credential file, which was set by our store method. Since we are storing the credentials in the file, we should provide access to only the authorized users. Now we have seen how to store the credentials using git credential helper with memory cache method and the storage method. We had some problem with memory cache for Windows machine because of Unix sockets. So for Windows machine, instead of cache, we can set the manager for the value of credential helper. So let us see that now. So for credential manager, so I'll remove the existing credentials which are stored in the files. So for that, I'll go to the home directory. So we have removed both the files. So now in addition to removing the credentials, let us also change the configuration. So here I will give edit option and I will remove this credential part. So we have removed the credential section there. So let us save the file. So now the file is saved. So now we need to reset the credential helper to manager. So here I am setting the credential helper to manager. So we can verify that. Here we can see that it is set to the manager. So now let us enter the pull command again. So now we can see that a new pop-up is opened. So here we need to enter our token. So let me click on token here. So let us enter the token and we can click on sign in option. So now our credentials are stored using git credential manager. So let us try to execute pull command again. So this time it did not open the pop-up and we do not need to enter the credentials again because our credentials are stored in the Credential Manager. This is the third method in which we can store the credentials using Credential Manager in the Windows machines. So in this video, we have seen how to store the Git credentials in the Git client when we try to access the GitHub server using HTTPS protocol. I hope this video helps. If you like the video, please like, share and subscribe. Thanks a lot for watching.